This podcast is with Justin from the Run and Gun Podcast. We talk about how he finds bucks year in and year out, his transition from hunting out east to Kentucky. Hope you guys enjoy this podcast. Here we go. And so tell us a little bit about yourself here and introduce yourself. I did a very, very, very Cliff Note version of who you are, but go ahead and give a formal.
I got you. So my name is Justin Synan. As you guys probably know, I'm 33 years old. Got 2 kids. I'm a father first. I love my family time, but I've been hunting for a long time. I guess I've been a dedicated bow hunter for about 20 years now, and this year I think I'm up. I don't know. I've killed a Pope and Young for the past 11 years, which is a cool accomplishment. I mean, it comes with a lot of work, and I absolutely love it. I'm just ate up with whitetails and hunting and bow hunting and just a way of life, man. I mean, as you know, it's just it never ends, and when the season ends, it just one step closer to the next season. So
yeah, that's the cool thing about whitetails is there literally is always something to be doing.
absolutely.
Always. And so kind of just something I just picked up here. Obviously, you killed Pope and Young the last 11 years. That's a heck of an accomplishment. But you mentioned, moving to Kentucky the last couple of years, you've had a lot of success. And what have you done differently the last 3 years versus the last 17 years of being a bow hunter? Was it moving to Kentucky, or was it or changing things up, or both?
Well, I think I came to the realization. See, when I was in Maryland, I did a lot of different hunting, because in Maryland we have a lot of different land layouts and stuff. So you can go to the east side of Maryland and you're hunting a lot of flat ground, a lot of marsh and ag, and there's a ton of big deer on the east side.
Mm-hmm.
Where I was at is kind of in the central, and it was more hill country, and it's a lot more people. It's a lot harder to get access on good ground without having to pay for it. So I fell into suburban bow hunting just from knocking on doors and figuring out there were some giant bucks to go after in these suburban areas. And I just kind of got sick of it, man. I realized, I was consistently killing mature bucks, but mature bucks in Maryland were, 130. You were lucky to kill 140, like they were there, but it's not easy to find them. So my thought process was, if I can go to a state where, there's more big deer, and when these deer are mature, they're hitting 140s, 150s, 160s, then I should be able to, up my bar. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, when I moved here, and I don't want to say it's easier, because it's not, but the caliber of deer here, and there's not as many of them in Maryland where I was hunting at.
Mm-hmm. I assume
so that was
lower density of hunters too.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for bow hunters, without dropping too much info. I'm sure everybody knows Kentucky has some great bucks. It's just, you really got to put in the effort, man. They're not around every corner, but if you put the work in, good things will follow. It seems to happen. Maybe I'm just lucky, but I know there's no lack of effort. I can promise you that.
Yeah. And so obviously moving to Kentucky, you mentioned that there's ultimately more bucks that you can chase that have a higher probability of killing. And that's kind of what I'm gathering from that. Why is that? Is it because the parcels are larger and you have more room to run around and hypothetically less people to compete with? Because obviously suburban hunting or even small parcel hunting, there's a lot of times really big deer there, but you're hunting very, very small tracks. And if the deer's on there, he's on there. If he's not, he's not. And so what's been like the comparison and contrast of that?
Well, there's a lot more land. There's a lot more places for these bucks to hide. I would say the thing is, when you get a deer here that's into the 4 or 5 year old range, you're looking at a lot bigger animal. The genetics are here. We specifically moved to the area I'm in for quality deer. I mean, I literally looked on Onyx and looked at the Boone and Crockett records, and I found a little gem of an area, I would say. And it's been great, man. I mean, almost every year, within a square mile radius of where I am, there's multiple Boone and Crockett deer that are killed. So I know it's a matter of time for me, when I kill a Boone and Crockett. I just, I mean, actually, this year I was chasing a deer that was killed. Unfortunately, it wasn't me, but he was 240.
Whoa.
So, you know,
Jeez.
yeah, yeah, dude, it was really an honor to be able to chase this buck, and I came extremely close to killing him. Um, Not in the woods, but I was in his vicinity. You know, I found a shed off of him this winter from 2 years prior. So I mean, I was in
You're
his
right there.
zone. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What okay, so if you could hop in a time machine, what would you have done differently to kill that deer last year?
Really, man, I'm kind of proud of myself. I'll be dead honest, Jake. I got as close as I could to killing that deer. You can imagine, and maybe you've been in this situation, you know, when people know that, and it really kind of took me back. I'm sorry, I'm hopping all over the place,
Oh,
but
good.
it really took me back to the suburban hunting that I used to do because it was a small cattle farm that this deer was living on. And everybody around this area knew that this buck was there. Okay. So nobody wanted to give you permission. I luckily I locked in a small, like, 60 acres that was near him, and I knew that eventually he would use this property, but he just was not coming from this cattle farm onto me. So at the end of the day, that, you know, I did everything I could. This deer just wasn't in my neck of the woods. You know,
Mhm.
he didn't get a chance to make it there. I'm sure he would have if he wasn't killed in September. I'm sure he would have, you know, came
Oh,
into
he's killed
this.
early.
Yeah, he was killed early. And I'm glad that a hunter did actually kill this buck because he had EHD, and
Mm,
the the hunter, you know, harvested him a few days before I think he would have died, you know, from EHD. So hats
that's
off
great.
to him. Yeah, I think it's a great story. I'm trying to work on trying to build a story on this buck because I've met a few people after the fact that have had sheds off of him, and you know, it's definitely a cool story. And how many chances am I going to get at a 240-inch deer? I mean, it might never happen again.
Yeah, that's an insane size of of an
Yeah,
animal.
he was a
They
really cool, non-typical.
yeah, that is really cool. So, um, what else changed from your tactics as far as going from suburban hunting in Maryland and different types of strategies to hunting in Kentucky too? Because I imagine there had to be some additional adjustments there to move there and find success right away.
Yeah, the woods are completely different here versus where I grew up hunting. They're way thicker. There's way more vast land. There's way less pressure. Um, I would say in total, I had to up my tactics in scouting. I had to be a lot more mobile. Um, I just grind, man. I honestly just every year I try to put in as much effort as I can to find a quality buck that I want to chase, and then I hone in on him. And it's just gets down to scouting these core areas of these bucks and figuring out what side of the farm they like, or which, you know, whether it's public or private. Um, I do a mixture of all. I mean, I would say I scout more public than I do private. It's just I just haven't found that caliber of buck that I'm looking for on the public, but I know they're around.
Mhm.
It's just and it's also a little tougher because, you know, in archery season we've got a great chance, but when rifle kicks in, all these guys just pound the public, and it's kind of shot after rifle season. So you
Mhm.
really got to put your effort in before, you know, mid-November around here. So
Yeah, and you guys have that early when does Kentucky tip is that like the first week of September or second week of
yeah,
September?
yes, sir. It's usually it's like the first Saturday, I believe, of September. This year it's going to be September 2nd. So I'm really, really trying to you know, stack the cards in my deck for a good velvet buck. That's kind of been a dream of mine for a long time.
Yeah, so what's your strategy to shoot your first velvet buck?
Work
What's the
my
game
ass
plan?
off and try to find one, dude. I mean, I always find good deer. It's just hard to find like that really good deer, you know?
Mhm.
I have found them before, and then it's just like, you know, it's almost like a ticking time bomb. Once they shed out of that velvet, it's like, bloop, and they go do their thing. So maybe this year things will be a little different for me. You know, and crop rotations play a part too. You know, some of this public that I hunt is not near ag. So I would say a lot of the bucks here, if you have a bean field, you've got a great chance. But when it's in corn, it's a little bit different. So you kind of have to be a little bit lucky. I think my main objective is to just cast a wider net and try to scout more public. Try to lock in maybe some new properties and just put out that many more cameras and try to find the buck that I'm looking for.
How many cameras are you running right now?
Last year was a record for me. I had 28 that I put out, and I
Mhm.
know, obviously we're on the Exodus podcast, so there's tons of guys that put out way more cameras than I do, but
Uh-huh.
it's like every year it's like an ebb and flow of like, oh, this camera went bad, that camera went bad, and it's like you're just constantly
Need some
buying
extras.
new cameras, yeah, or like this one was set in the woods for 2 months and it like didn't even work, so
Mhm.
it's just one of those things. I mean,
So, and then when you're when you're putting like, so when you talk about, obviously, the the secret sauce of everyone is it's really just spending the time to put in the work and get better, and having multiple years too. Like, you've been bow hunting, you've been a dedicated bow hunter for 20 years, and that's a
yeah.
long time, 2 decades. And so I think people listening that are maybe just getting started too, there's this illusion of all these other guys are really successful and they're rocking and rolling, but there's been many years of progression and then a lot of lessons learned. And so what I'm getting at too, like with running your cameras, is it you find a buck that you want to target. So like you have this cast of 20 some cameras out. And then from there, is it just, are you getting focused on that solo deer to try to kill that one deer? Or is it, do you have like a plan A and then like you have buck number B and C throughout the season?
Yeah, last year that really bit me in the ass. I'll be honest with you. I put all my cards into that 240, and when he was killed, it was like, okay, start from scratch. I had some good caliber. I had a couple 140s on camera, but my goal last year was something, 150s to 160s. Honestly, my goal was to kill a Boone and Crockett. That's kind of what I wanted. I really wanted that. But I couldn't find it, man. And it was a real grind to just cover that much more ground and find the time to do it. It's like I'm a working guy. It's not like you kind of touched on it there. With time and bow hunting, and it's like a lot of these guys you see, that are super successful. We've kind of I'm in the same boat. I've kind of created my life around this where I've set up, now I'm a handyman. I do heating and air. I do whatever I can do to create my own schedule. So I'm more flexible with, okay, Monday and Tuesday, I'm going to do some work. And then Wednesday, I'm going to go set a whole day and just run cameras here or there or scout. And, it's a constant struggle, man. Like, you got to create time to create a living, and you got to have family time, and you got to have whitetail time. And it's one of those things where, if you can't find what you're looking for, what do? You just keep going. And I think that's kind of like the secret sauce, if you want to call it, is just never giving up and just constantly trying to adjust and get, just be witty about what you're doing and moving your cameras according to what's going on in that time of year. And I think a lot of people just kind of like give up, or they're like, oh, well, I see all these videos of these guys, shooting deer, and they're like, they go in and they dive in and bam, and they kill a buck. And it's like, you need to realize like that's only one little tidbit of that guy's season, and it's not reality. Um, a lot of these guys have like endless amounts of time to scout and find these deer. And for a normal blue collar guy, man, like, you're going to have years where, you're going to have to settle on a certain caliber of deer. We all want to shoot a giant. We all want to kill a giant buck, but sometimes you just need to be real with yourself and, shoot what makes you happy and not worry about what somebody else is doing, or, trying to carve a notch and shoot the biggest thing ever. It's like, just try not to get caught up in that so much, and that's kind of where I'm at. I feel like,
Mhm.
I obviously I want to kill a booner, but, if I find something that intrigues me, I'm going for it.
Yeah, I think yeah, the theme there is like run your race.
Yeah.
Like know what's going to make you happy. Do it.
Right.
And I mean, like clearly you've designed your entire life to hunt deer. So like,
I have. Yeah. Yeah, I am guilty, man. I mean, I
I res-
love it. It's great.
yeah, I respect that. And so we were talking before, like you've kind of adopted the more mobile, like running gun style of hunting. Is that something you've adopted recently, the last few years, or were you doing that in Maryland as well?
Honestly, I'm super blessed. My dad, he got me into hunting, and we never really baited deer. We could have baited deer in Maryland. I didn't even know about it until I was, in my 20s, and I talked to some guys, and they're like, "Oh, we're putting out corn for deer," and I'm like, it just sounded so foreign to me. I'm like, really? Like, okay, well, I've never done that. I always cut my teeth hunting deer and just reading sign and scouting. And I grew up hunting with a climber, and that's all that we used to do is just hunt with a climber. And I was just constantly being mobile before
You
I
knew what you're
didn't
doing.
even, yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't even know that that was, before it was even called anything like that. It's just how we hunted deer. And I would say the only thing I've really adjusted or tailored is I've gotten into saddle hunting. Of course, like I started off with a hang on, and it just seemed like a lot. Now, I think at the first time I just wanted to hang 4 sticks and get my stand, and it just seemed like a nightmare to me on how I can carry all this stuff up a tree
Especially
and
self
get
filming
set up.
too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I will say when I first adapted, like, the hang and hunt style, I wasn't filming. I got into that, like, right around that time frame, I guess maybe a year or two later. But when I found the saddle, like, right at the craze of saddle, right when it started, I tried it, and it just, man, it just, I loved it. It was just a quick way and a more efficient way, less weight. And I just took to it, man. I fell out of a climber when I was younger. And it was always in the back of my head, like, man, like, I've realized how quick things can happen. And to me, the saddle was just a safer way to hunt. I never tell anybody, well, I do sometimes, but most of the time people don't know where I'm at. So
Mhm.
if I've fallen, man, I can't get a hold of anybody. Who's going to come save me? Nobody. So I went out of my way to make sure I was safe. And to me, saddle hunting, I'm always connected to the tree, and it's just an efficient style. And I just gravitated towards that. Moving to Kentucky, our trees are the woods are way thicker, and it's a lot easier to hunt with a saddle because I hunt a lot lower now than I used to. And you
What's
don't
low to you?
really, like 10 feet to 12.
Okay.
I know it's kind of funny, isn't it? Like how many more people hunt low now versus, the
Hmm.
standard 5 years ago used to be 20 feet, everybody
Yep.
20 feet, 20 feet.
Yep.
And now it's like, I mean, shoot, man, sometimes I'll hunt 8 foot off the ground. Every situation's different. But I think I just enjoy the aspect of hunting new places all the time. It's boring to me to hunt the same hang on over, a bait pile and I'm not knocking anybody. If hunt the way that you enjoy hunting, but to me, I just really enjoy, the whole aspect of scouting and hunting. And,
Hmm.
I think I've been really lucky to just be good at reading deer sign at a young age. And it's just kind of come natural to me.
Hmm. And okay, so you've pretty much adopted. So are you solely a saddle hunter now, or do you still use a
No,
tree
no.
stand?
I'll take the hang on with me. At first, like when I first started, I had a really heavy hang on, and it just didn't seem, it was like cumbersome to me. It was like, man, I've got all this weight on my back and all this crap, and it just wasn't efficient. And the saddle just, to me, it just clicked. I'm like, less weight, less bulk, I can hide behind a tree. A lot of times in suburban, like I was hiding behind these trees because these deer would come in the woods and just be looking up, man. I mean, you wouldn't think there's much pressure in suburban, but there was a ton of pressure. I mean, these deer would come and look at a ladder stand before they entered the woods. So,
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny how that works because this week's podcast with Clint McCoy, and he talks about how deer are able to recall smell, and I'm sure they can recall like vision and everything else.
oh yeah,
And I'm just assuming that now, but um, it is crazy how deer can get conditioned to different environments. And I think a lot of the successful deer hunters you talk to, it's like the element of the first sit or like catching the deer by surprise. And I do think there's a lot of validity to that. And
Yeah.
obviously, hunting 8 foot high or 10 foot high or 12 foot high out of a saddle, I feel like you're going to catch some deer by surprise because they're not
Yeah,
used to.
they just really, I think they don't look for you at that level, man. I mean, I've been super blessed to, know some, really quality people like Cody and Justin Hollinsworth and Andre and all these guys. And it's like when you see the caliber of deer these guys are killing and how they're killing them, it's like, well, I mean, obviously it works. So, and then you see it work for yourself and you're like, it's just the way I hunt now, man. It's like I can look at a tree and I'm like, all right, there's my spot, and I'll go and get right in there. And I mean, deer have, they just have no clue you're there. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about your last season buck. So 2021.
Okay.
Walk us through the chronicling of that. So summer scouting. When did you find this deer, top to
Yeah.
bottom?
Yeah. So I picked up a farm. I got permission to hunt this farm. It's about like 250 acres. I was super like excited and overwhelmed at the same time. So I went on X. I'm looking around, mark some pins. I go in there with the four wheeler because I mean, literally, you're talking like a couple mile walk and to go all the way around the edge of this farm. And I go in there and where one of my pins were, which I figure was the highest probability for a buck to be bedded at.
And why
There,
was that?
it was just the perfect vantage point for a buck to look out.
Mhm.
On this farm, it was a perfect little knob that stuck out, and it had a little bit of elevation. This deer could see you coming from a long ways, but I think I was lucky when I went in there and scouted. The wind was in my face, so he couldn't really smell me. I'm pretty sure he was just bedded down like right on the edge of the beans, so he didn't really wasn't really alert. And I was going real slow with the four wheeler. Well, I end up bumping him. And dude, I was in complete shock. I see this buck jump up, flyers hanging. I'm like, oh my God. And I put a camera in there. I set a little bit of mineral out. And dude, he was there. Like, I think he came in like the day after, I left. And I got these beautiful pictures. I mean, at first I thought he was young. He looked young to me. And I kind of wrote him off, because I was like, it'd be great to see him make it another year. I feel like that would be the giant, like Boone and Crockett caliber deer.
Mhm.
And, I got some more pictures of him and I was like, I'd like to see him in person. So fast forward, Velvet, he peels out of Velvet and disappears. Um, I did not really have anything else on that farm that I was really interested in. So I put boots on the ground, started hunting scouting all the public, doing some hanging hunts on public on some new spots because that worked for me the previous year. And I went back in there, checked some cameras, and he popped back up like late October. And I was like, sweet, he still looks kind of borderline, like his body wise. And I think it was because his rack was so big, man. It kind of dwarfed his body and made him look small. And I started hunting him. It was like early November. I had some friends in from out of town. They came from Maryland to hunt. And I really put I think I put too much effort in trying to get them on a deer. And I was hanging stands for them and doing this and doing that. And, so hindsight 2020, it was probably a good thing because I left the pressure off of that farm. So I'm hunting a farm that's completely unpressured. I started doing some hanging hunts where I had him in the summertime, figuring maybe I'd catch him. I just wanted to get a visual on him and see what he was doing. I hunted 2 days, 2 days without even seeing a deer, which was mind blowing to me. I was like, I think it was that lull period right there before the rut really kicks, where they kind of like just wind down a little bit. And day three, I moved to another side of the farm and I saw an absolute giant. And I was like, damn. And he came out of last light, walked across this field, and I started scouting. I came out there and I started scouting this other side that I had not even put a camera in. And I don't know why I wrote it off. Honestly, it was probably just, an amateur mistake, like whatever, just, typical. overlooked spot that was where you really should have been. And dude, there was a scrape in there, Jake. It was literally the size of a car hood. Like it was enormous. And I had all my gear on my back and I was like, this is it. And I just got that gut feeling. I'm like, this is the spot. This is where he's been at. And I couldn't find like a tree anywhere. Like I'm like, all these trees is it's like where we're at, it's like really, really thick. Like I was saying, there's almost all these vines that grow all over the place. So I find these two narrow, and when I say narrow, I mean this tree was you could wrap both your hands around it almost and choke it. And I got up there and there's a bunch of vines near, and I'm like, all right, I got the cover and I got this narrow little shooting lane. And I'm like, yeah, if he comes from the woods, and I was anticipating him coming out of the hardwoods, but he actually came from my right side, which is where all the field was. And I totally didn't think that's where he was going to come. So I trimmed all these lanes out on my left, but he came from the right. And he came in with a doe. And honestly, at that point, man, I had been hunting so hard and not seeing anything. Like I was ready to throttle this doe. Like I remember seeing her and I'm like, she's like 15 yards. And I'm like, I grab my bow and I'm ready to shoot her. And like I get her pretty much square in front of me. And, I had the feeling, I'm like, okay, she's by herself. Well, dude, she turned as soon as I got the thought, like, I bet you there's a buck with her. And she turned around and he's right there. And I'm like, oh shit, like this deer is way bigger than I thought he was. All I see is mass because his right side, I mean, you can see him behind me. His right side's like super palmated and it's like a white rack.
Hmm.
And I see all these kickers and I just went into like kill mode, dude. And I'm just filming him. And he's pretty much at my like 1 o'clock and I can't really shoot him. And like I said, this tree I'm in is so tiny. I'm like afraid to move too much because like the whole tree would be moving if I
Right.
moved a lot. Right. So I'm
Yep.
like, it's dead quiet, like last light. And he just took two more steps and he turned and looked completely away from me. And I just drew back and I spun around the tree pretty much like pivoted probably like maybe 90 degrees. And I just hung out there, man. And I pinwheeled that deer at like 15 yards and I watched him crash. And I don't think I've ever been that excited. Like when I watched him go down, I just lost it, man. And if you guys want, you can watch the episode. It's on Whitetail Addictions. It's on my YouTube channel too, Running and Gunning Outdoors. And
So
it's
do you? So you mentioned it was an overlooked area, which is a common theme. A
yeah,
lot of times, like
right,
the most overlooked spot, or like the spot, like why haven't I ever been over there? And you walk over there,
yeah.
it's like absolutely tore up. And so, do you think that deer just relocated to that part of the farm, or was he just on that doe and it was right place, right time?
I honestly, I would have to say that that is the core area where a lot of does frequent, and I think he just transitioned over to that side.
Hmm.
If looking back at it, I would say it was more mainly a really good doe area, and he just knew, he picked up on one of the mature does that was in there, and like I said, it was a big doe that came through, so I was more than ready to send her to the freezer, and
Let me
luckily
ask
I didn't.
Leah, let me ask, what if you were not gonna shoot that doe? Do you think you would have been able to get positioned and shoot that deer? Because at that point, they're gonna be, let's say you're just passively watching that doe. You don't,
Mhm.
let's say in this world, you don't grab your bow, or you're like kind of, maybe you have your hand on the bow and you haven't pulled it up off like whatever strap or whatever you had it hanging on. Do you think you would have been able to go through all those motions once that doe moved forward a little bit and then you saw that buck? So the picture I'm trying to draw is you're watching this doe, it's
Mhm.
15 yards away. You're in a tiny little tree. And so you haven't grabbed your bow yet, or maybe you have your hand on your bow. Do you think you would have been able to pull that off? Or do you think it was like almost a blessing that you were mentally walking through the process that you're like, I'm gonna shoot that doe?
I think I would have still pulled it off. That's one thing I do like about saddle hunting is because my bow is directly in front of me with the tree, like parallel to the
Yep.
tree. So it's not much movement for me to move my arm, to right in front of my chest and grab it.
Hmm.
Um, I'm trying to think like, yeah, I did have my hand on my bow before I actually saw that buck. So it was a blessing in disguise.
Uh-huh.
Um, But man, I just, you know how quick things happen, like when you're
Oh yeah.
actually in the moment and you're like, oh, it's go time.
It's fast and slow motion at the same time. And I know
A
that doesn't
hundred
make
percent.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's spot on. Um, it was just awesome. And oh, I left out the part that the coyotes started going nuts when he was like sub 20 yards. Like, I don't know what the reasoning was, but they were probably like a couple hundred yards away and a pack of coyotes went nuts. And that's kind of what made him turn and look back at them. And that's how I got away with it. But I
And-
think I still would have gotten away with it. He wasn't, he was a super calm buck. You know, she was calm. They were literally just walking across this bean field to just go into the woods. And I just got lucky and cut him off.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
got really lucky they didn't walk on the edge of the bean field like I did to get there.
Mm.
Because they took a nice, there was just this nice little grass path, probably 10 yards in the beans. You know what I mean? Like where you
Yeah.
just have like a little transition from where they planted. And that's the trail these deer were taking. I remember pulling my arrow out of the ground and I'm like, well, no wonder they use this trail. It's like a perfect little highway for them.
Mhm. Man, that's really cool. And what was the date you ended up shooting him?
November 5th. And honestly, Jake, that's been I've killed, I want to say 4 to 5 of my good deer on that date. November 4th and 5th have been excellent to me.
Give me your November 4th and 5th setup. So obviously this one was on a scrape that you found, but you wake up, it's November 4th or 5th. Walk me
What
through
am
your
I
day.
doing?
Walk me through your day.
Oh man. Well, first I got to have a buck I want to kill. Honestly, all the deer that I have killed on those dates, minus one I've known about and been pursuing. Um, I think that's just a good day where these deer are just active, man. Some of them have been on a full moon. I've had a lot of good success on full moon. The first full moon during the rut, like during November. Um,
So like
my
what does your morning setup look like? Are you sitting dark to dark in one spot? Are you going out for a
no,
morning spot,
it's
transitioning?
it's all situational. If I'm in a rut funnel, I think I've really just put it into overdrive leading up to those dates. Like those are primarily like now. Those will be like a couple days that I'll hunt in preparation, knowing that like that's when things are ramping up. So I try to find like the hottest sign I can November 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And that's been my primary, route leading up to it because they're laying down the sign, like come late October into that early November
Woods are alive.
timeframe.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's a lot easier to read sign. I'm not the greatest hunter. I'll be the first to tell you. I'm just persistent and I know how to read sign. And if you put in the effort and you educate yourself and you put in, enough time in the woods, you'll learn what spot you need to be in. You know what I mean? There's no substitute for time and knowledge.
Mhm.
I think that's one thing I've really tried to, we have a podcast too, the Running and Gunning podcast. We really try to push that, to newer hunters. It's like, man, like there's no secret sauce. There's no, you're not going to gain all this knowledge just from listening to a podcast. You have to get in the woods. You have to fail. And if anything, I learn more from failure than I do success.
Mhm.
And that's just been my mindset. I've learned so much more from failing. And I think it's just, I've become a really consistent killer that late October to early November timeframe because the deer are just that much more active.
Mhm. Yeah. And so I guess maybe so November, let's say second, third, fourth, you're looking for red hot sign, and then you're setting up on that. I mean, obviously, that's just. I wish you could stretch out. I wish you could duplicate like the first 10 days of November and have it go for a full month because
Yeah,
it goes so fast,
it
and
does, man.
every sit feels so precious because it's just so limited. Like the time
Yeah.
of where things are just the best is such a short window, at least for someone like for me, anyways. And so, I guess the basis of my question is like any other tips or advice that someone listening this year can think like, okay, I need to find the red hot sign, and then what? Like, how are you setting up on some of these pieces? Like, so this someone listening to this, they're thinking, okay, I know of a buck that's in the general vicinity. I've had him on camera a handful of times throughout October and then leading up in late October. I've got him on the scrape, and it's getting to be really, really good. How do I go in for the kill? Like anything that has been a common denominator of those 3 or 4 bucks that you've shot on the fifth. Was it morning, evenings? What was the setup like?
Um, I'd say it's been 50-50 for me, mornings and evenings. I'm more consistent in the evenings, and I think it's literally because leading up to that time frame, I get so much more aggressive that I will scout my ass off in the after a morning hunt, and I'll find that sign, and then I set up and I kill.
Mhm,
I would say take the time and walk. Do not be afraid to scare deer. If you bump a deer and it's a giant, guess what? You know where he is. Just because you bump him, it's not game over, especially during the rut. I mean, we've all heard about the bump and dump. I've never pulled that off. I'll be dead honest. I mean,
super impressive when
yeah,
when it worked.
it's a very situational tactic. I haven't had the opportunity to pull that off. Um, but for me, I try to find those really big scrapes. I think that's one thing I really try to key on. Find the biggest scrape you can and walk, as much of your property as you can and set up near that. And if you can figure out where you think the deer are coming from and going to, and you have the right wind, then that deer should be dead. You know what I'm
Mhm,
saying? Around that time frame, focus on where the does are. Put more effort into figuring out and hunting where the does are versus trying to figure out where that buck is. Because if you know where the does are, he's going to be with them. And a lot it's kind of frustrating because a lot of guys are like, oh, well, you're just a rut hunter, you're just waiting, you're just focusing on luck. And I'm like, like I do agree with you, but at the same time, like I've had a lot of success targeting specific bucks in that time frame. And to me, like there's no easier time to kill that specific deer if you're on him and
mhm,
his general area and you know where there's a doe group, then I mean, like it's a matter of time, man. You stack that deck in your favor and hunt the wind. Eventually, you're going to bump him. You're going to run into him.
mhm. So you mentioned failures are the best the teaching method. What is a failure that has maybe taught you a really good lesson? Maybe it's a specific deer or something that you did wrong for a long time that you realize like, why am I doing this? This isn't working.
Yeah, I think it's more for me personally, I've had a lot of failures with shooting. When I was younger, I've always been blessed as far as getting on deer, and I think I've always had a niche for picking the right trees. And I struggled in my archery. Okay, so I messed up on what would still be probably the biggest buck I've ever killed. I missed him at like 20 yards. And
Oh,
it really wasn't I don't like blaming problems on gear, but I will say this situation particularly was my peep sight was not large enough. And the deer came in and I was calm as could be, but I couldn't see through my peep sight and I put the pin on him and I shot right under his armpit. And
oh man.
he was probably a 170 to maybe 180. I really don't know, but I can tell you from the caliber of deer I have shot and knowing how big he was definitely every bit of a Boone and Crockett. But you know, learning from deer flinching, dropping, ducking an arrow, it's all just stuff that you got to go through, man. I mean, there's no quick way to learn how to shoot deer with a bow other than shooting deer with a bow. I've had a lot of failure on does and bucks, and I've learned a lot better for shot placement. And if you want to get good at killing bucks, kill some does. There's too many guys out here that are just concerned about killing bucks. Shoot a bunch of does with your bow. If you want to kill a good buck with your bow, you need to shoot some does. They're just as sketchy as a big buck. I mean, a mature doe, man, I would say honestly, sometimes they're more weary than some of these bucks I've shot. And
Mhm.
you can get, your time for reading a deer's body language and being able to get away with drawing your bow and, waiting for the right time. Like that's everything. So that's what
I
I try to
yeah,
preach that to people.
that's an excellent piece of advice. Shoot more does because realistically, if you're let's say you're only shooting, you know, you're only trying to shoot a buck of whatever caliber that is for you for what your goals are. For most guys, maybe every like once every year, or maybe once every 2 years, or once every 3 years. That's not enough reps to make it happen when you do have that potential booner in front of you. And Yeah, I mean, because so many things can go wrong during the moment of truth. Like so many things. I've been there.
Yeah.
I
Right.
can say it. It's like all these things that
Yeah.
you that if you just went through the process and like went through that mental checklist on does earlier in the year and just getting more practice. And I think that comes down to the years of experience too. And the more deer you can settle your sight on and hit where you're aiming, like you're
Yeah.
inherently going to be in a better position when it
That was
when all
honestly
come up.
one of the funnest things about suburban bow hunting for me was, man, I mean, there was 5 or 6 years I killed 10 to 12 deer a year. We had unlimited doe harvests in Maryland, so it was like, I mean,
A
I
lot of
know,
reps.
yeah, I'm like, I know if I get a buck in 20 yards, like that thing is going home with me, you know?
Hmm.
So I guess it's just building that confidence level for yourself. Like you said, if you got a guy that's only killing 1 buck a year or whatever it might be, like how much justice are you doing? You know, you're a bigger deer, like and deer in general, they duck the string. You know, I've really focused on not shooting a deer at 30 yards. Some
So
guys
30 in is your goal.
30 in is my goal. I mean, I've literally had a deer. I made a perfect shot. I executed the shot right. He completely ducked my string from 30 yards. So if I'm shooting a deer at 30 now, I always try to aim for the heart, but if they're 25, sub 25, they're not gonna. They're it's pretty hard for them to duck your string at that
Mhm.
close.
You mentioned you've kind of developed the strategy or the process of picking the tree. So, what is the tree? And I know this is such a situational thing, but is there any
Yeah,
common denominators of like that when you're trying to pick a tree? h- Break that down. Are you trying to be 20 yards from where you anticipate the
cover.
deer to be? So, okay.
Yeah, yes. I mean, all right. Number one, you got to be in the right area. You got to, and that just comes with time. Like I said, you know, you can hunt over a scrape, you know, but not every time I go set up am I hunting over a scrape. I might be hunting the edge of thick hardwoods and open hardwoods, and I'm just tucked back in. I love split trees. If I can find a tree that has two splits or maybe even a single tree and then it branches up into a Y and I'll tuck right up in there. And you gotta really try to focus on not silhouetting yourself. I've been picked off a ton of times. You know, if you can try to think about the way a deer's gonna come through and look at your position, you know, that's a huge thing. And I think that's one thing that I really genuinely like about saddle hunting is I can draw my bow back. If I'm in a big enough tree, I can completely draw my bow back and then expose myself in that last second before, you know, when that deer's not looking and get away with
Hmm.
that movement.
Hmm.
Um, you know, some of these trees around here, if I'm in a hang on, they're so tiny, like I think I'd be sticking out like a sore thumb. Um, it's not to say like this guy or that guy could pull it off. It's just my preference. But I always try to find that cover, man. Wherever that height is in that cover, I'll hunt 20. It doesn't matter to me, but it's just all situational and finding the right spot and, you know, picking that tree. And one of the other things I want to touch on is don't stress out about finding the perfect tree. Pick one or two trees and then try to pick out two or three things that you really like about that and then go with it and just send it. Do
Hmm.
not like stress because I mean, we've all been there, right? You get to a spot and you're like, oh, what should I do? You know, this tree, that tree. It's like, no, man. Like, give yourself, you know, pick what you think might be option one or option two, and whatever one you can get to, like more silent or whatever one has the better cover. That's the one I'm going with.
Hmm. So covers number one basically at the end of the
Yeah,
day. So
absolutely.
and so just to break this down is to explain it to like first graders. So cover would mean back cover, multiple branches shooting out, maybe
A
the tree
big tree
wise
trunk.
off.
It could be a
Okay.
bare tree. If it's split, you get right in between that split and
Mhm.
you just,
Lean up
you
against.
know, try to make yourself look as natural as possible, you know. And that goes back to the height thing. You know, when you're 20 feet up in a tree and you've got, you know, the sky behind you, think about yourself moving around like a deer's going to pick up on that. If you're lower, you've got that much more tree canopy behind you, you know. And sometimes you can create your own cover. Bring some pruners with you. Pruners are probably one of the most used tools that I have in my arsenal. I'd trim all kinds of stuff, and I might even, if I can, I'll tuck a limb in here or there to break up my outline if it's a bare tree. But I'm pretty lucky here. I mean, there's a lot of times where there's so much cover around me. It's like I'm literally going to shoot a deer at 10 or 20 yards and that's it, you know.
Are you bringing a an extension saw, like a hand saw, with you to trim shooting lanes? Because it sounds, I'm picturing it to be really thick, or you
Yeah,
have small pockets and that's what you have to work.
sometimes it's really thick, and honestly, I'm not big on cutting trees. Um, I've done that a handful of times. If I hunt a spot in the morning, let's say, and I see a bunch of deer transition through an area, and I'm like, man, I really didn't have any shot opportunities. If I would have had that lane open, I could have gotten away with it. I'll go cut that tree. But by all means, if you do cut that tree, get it the heck out of there or cut it and stick it in the ground. I have had a big buck pick off. I cut a tree down one time and he absolutely noticed it. And he just his whole demeanor changed when he walked into there. He just immediately became alert. I know he couldn't smell me. And I 100% know that it was like he saw that tree and it was just like somebody moving the couch in your living room. You know what I mean? Like I was in his core area and I cut that lane so I could shoot him and it backfired.
Yeah,
So you gotta be like, I'm not saying sometimes you're not gonna catch a stupid buck, you know, because some of them are stupid and some of them are smart, but do what you can, you know, take a little bit of dirt, cover up that tree you cut down, like the base of it. Take
mhm.
that tree and move it out of your sight. Um, but as far as me taking a pole saw with me, no. I'm more of a minimalistic style hunter. I don't really like bringing heavy stuff with me. I have a tree saw and I will use it. Silky is my go-to. If you guys do not know about them, check them out. Silky saws are badass. They're so sharp. You're almost a lot quieter because it's so sharp. A lot less movement. They're definitely worth it. They make a ton of different saws. So I like the medium size. I think it's called the Gomboy.
Hmm,
Um, but I
I
learned
see it
about
here.
that from David. I can't think of his last name now. It's like Dave is Outdoors is his Instagram handle.
Hmm, I'll check those out. Yeah,
Yeah, you should, man. They're great.
very cool. Interesting. So, one of these notes I had was this, kind of a broad topic here, but Instagram versus reality, or YouTube versus reality. I think we talked about it a little bit, of how a lot of times it's. I don't think anyone that puts out content is trying to be disingenuous, but to your point, there's so much that goes into it. Whether it's years of learning, or they maybe kill a deer on the first set, but maybe they have 3 years of history with them, and they scouted them, and
Right.
so give me your thoughts on someone listening that's like, how to I don't want to say, I'm trying to think of how to carefully word this. How to how to consume that content. What are
Yeah.
some things to consider?
Take it with a grain of salt. As you guys well are aware of, I mean, there's a ton of influx of giant bucks that are on Instagram and on YouTube. And I think, you know, I'm guilty of it too, man. I mean, I think we all are in some sense. Uh, you see everybody else killing deer and you're like, oh man, like when am I going to kill a buck? Well, like, am I doing this wrong? I mean, I went through a lot of self-doubt, and I think I've always kind of struggled with that self-doubt. And it comes down to you need to realize everybody's situation's different. Um, a lot of these guys that you're seeing on YouTube killing giants, it's like they might have access to an awesome piece of ground, or even if they're hunting public, they might have a lot more time than you have. There's so many different, situations. It's kind of hard to narrow it down, but I just want everybody to really know that like it's your hunt, and you know different situations call for different tactics, and you need to just have confidence in what you're doing and not worry about what other people are doing. I think that's one of the biggest things that I kind of stopped doing like in the past couple years is I would just get so stressed out because I would feel like I put all this effort in and it's like, where's my buck at? Where's this deer at? And And all my buddies are always on me every year, like, dude, you always kill a buck, this and that. And it's like, dude, like, you're not in my shoes. You have no idea how much time I've put in the woods scouting, and some of them do, some of them don't. But that's what you guys really need to be aware of is how much time goes into this. It's a life for many of us, and there's no substitute. Like I said earlier, there's no substitute for time.
Yeah.
This game, if you want to call it that, it comes with a lot of heartache and a lot of gas money and trail cam battery money. I mean, how bad do you really want it? I think if you're willing to put in the effort and you're willing to put in the time to learn and go through these failures, then you're going to be successful. I think there's too many people that go through this or that and they fail and they're like they just throw in the towel, and it's like that's the one thing I'll contribute a lot of my success to, man, is I just don't give up. Um, and it just seems to happen, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. Put the effort in, do the best you can, and the results will follow. I think that's the biggest takeaway I've had from the past couple years. Just having faith in what I'm doing and hunting the wind and scout hard, and good things will happen.
Mhm. What is a way that hunting has improved your life? Because hunting is your life,
Yeah,
like in a lot of ways. So how? Because sometimes we talk about how it can detract from different things. I mean, I think that's pretty fair to assume. I mean, it is a selfish sport, and I mean that's the easiest way to put it. So how is it
yeah.
in your dedication to whitetails? Like, how has that improved other areas of your endeavors?
Well, I'll say this: I've learned a ton of life lessons from hunting. As far as you get in, which you get out what you put in, and I've met a ton of awesome people in the hunting industry, and I've made some excellent friends that I don't think I would make in other, if I wasn't so committed and have created this life that I have. I've met some great people. I've learned a lot about perseverance and work ethic. I think the biggest thing is just like, and I don't mean to sound like that. Like I'm like, oh, well, like I work harder than anyone. No, I don't. There's guys that work harder than I do. Um, there's guys that run more cameras and everything else. But I just think, the one true thing that I've learned over the years is there's no substitute for hard work. And the more that you put in, the more you're going to get out of it. And
Mhm,
um, and I know, from talking to a lot of very successful hunters, we all share that same fire, and I think that's the greatest thing about hunting, man, is like just, and I'm kind of transitioning out of that solo, um how do I put a word on it? But like you had mentioned, it's like a solo game. It's almost like me. But man, I really enjoy the camaraderie of hunting. Like I would rather go grind for 4 or 5 days out of state with some friends and just get to share like those hunting stories and like our journey of like that hunt with, because there's so much of it that we don't even talk to anybody about, or stories that we could share that somebody might enjoy that never even get told. And when you're with somebody at a hunting camp, which I never grew up with a hunting camp, I wish I did. And I think now that I'm at that age and I'm really trying to step out and do more out of state hunts and hunt more with my friends and bring people along. And that's kind of my journey where I'm at with it now. I'm really looking forward to, having those good times with like some of these great people that I've met, through bow hunting.
mhm. No, that's cool. Well, so you have plans to hopefully shoot a velvet buck in Kentucky, and then you're headed out west for the first time.
Yes, sir. Yeah, man. I'm really, really gonna grind for a velvet buck this year. I hope it happens. I've got 1 week to get it done. And then I'm going to northern Idaho. I'm going with the outfitter. It's going to be a archery elk hunt during the rut. Should be awesome. I mean, honestly, this is like a bucket list thing for me.
Absolutely.
I have absolutely dreamed about this since I was a kid. So really looking forward to that. And then I think early November, I'm going to go try and hunt Missouri. Lord willing, I kill a velvet buck here. I'm going to transition to Indiana because I'm about 45 minutes to an hour from Indiana. So if everything goes well, in a perfect world, I
Uh-huh.
could knock down 3 good bucks this year and an elk, and that would be like my dream season of all dream seasons.
That would be incredible, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it all starts in September, so if you
that's
set
right.
it up properly, then,
The work
we
starts now. I mean,
yeah,
honestly, man, it's crunch time. We got 3 months to go. So,
it is crazy. Yeah, we were talking here. I can't believe it's
yeah,
already June, and then,
I know, man.
the summer always flies right by, and then next thing we know, it's really showtime, and I think, it's important to schedule like you were talking about, like, okay, Wednesday, I'm gonna go hang cameras. I do think it's very important to schedule that time for at least this is just for me, scheduling out that time, like, this is when this needs to be done and
Right.
doing it because there's so many different responsibilities and so many different things. It's if you don't allot the time for it, it just it doesn't get the attention it deserves. And I
No.
think the
That's really the best way to do it, man. Be more methodical about your scouting and try to have a goal. Like I've read this recently and it really hit me hard. It was like pursue your scouting like there's a booner on the line. And I think it was like Wes Delks that said that. And that hit me. I was like, man, that's solid.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of be gonna be my mindset this year is just trying to be way more methodical about what I'm doing, scout with the wind in my favor, get in, get out, be surgical about what I'm doing.
Love it, man. Well,
Yeah.
Justin, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to following along on your season.
I
Um,
appreciate it, man.
where can people follow along with what you have going on?
So you can follow me on Instagram at Justin Synan. I'm sure you guys will tag me or something on here. If you are interested, we have a podcast too, Running and Gunning podcast. Check us out on it's I think Run and Gun podcast at Instagram, and we do all mobile hunting content. Try to get good guests on, just like you guys. We have a ton of the same people that we're trying to get on, but
Yep.
we just try to put out good content, man. That's what it's all about.
Awesome.
And thank you so much for having me on, Jake. It's been a pleasure talking to you, man.
Yeah, man. Glad we were able to nail this down. And like I said, good luck this season. I look forward to following along. I hope to see that buffalo buck knocked down, and then quickly shortly after an elk there too. That would be
Hopefully,
incredible.
that would be sweet, man. I appreciate it.